Have you ever noticed how history doesn't just repeat itself, but it actually scales up? It's like it takes an old blueprint and builds something even more massive. Well, we're looking at a fascinating ancient blueprint today that points directly to a prophetic future. We are exploring the striking parallels between the ancient golden image of Babylon and the prophetic image of the beast. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a deeply structured look at how a spirit of rebellion from antiquity perfectly mirrors a predicted future crisis. All right, let's just dive right into this. We're looking at a really comprehensive blueprint today that places two massive biblical events side by side. On one hand, we've got Daniel chapter 3, which features King Nebuchadnezzar's infamous golden image in ancient Babylon, and on the other, we have Revelation chapters 13 through 15, detailing the prophetic image of the beast. The source material makes a really compelling argument here. These aren't just two random stories. They are actually the exact same spirit of rebellion, demonstrating an ancient pattern and its ultimate future fulfillment.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the parallels of worship. Second, crucial prophetic differences. Third, the theological pattern. Fourth, the talking doll deception. And finally, a call to faithfulness.
Starting off with Section 1, the parallels of worship.
Let's start with a direct side-by-side comparison of the historical event and the prophetic one. What's really wild here is the sheer symmetry of the coercion. Look at the first feature, compulsory worship. In Daniel 3, everyone in the empire is explicitly commanded to worship the golden image. Fast forward to Revelation 13, and literally the exact same mandate applies. Everyone is commanded to worship the beast. But it's that second point that really raises the stakes, right? The threat of death. In ancient Babylon, if you refused, you were thrown into a fiery furnace. In the prophetic future, refusal results in execution. It's the exact same ultimatum separated by millennia. Bow down or lose your life.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how systemic this control is. We're not talking about a casual suggestion here. This is enforced by the highest possible authority. In Daniel, government officials were literally assembled to enforce the worship. In Revelation, all people, great and small, are pressured by a global authority. Also, notice the coordinated public idolatry. Babylon used music as specific cues to signal the exact moment of forced worship. Revelation describes a highly organized, public worship of the image. But, and this is key, right alongside all that pressure, we see the resistance, the faithful remnant. In Babylon, 3 faithful Jews famously refused to bow to the statue. In Revelation, it's the saints who stand their ground and refuse to worship the beast. The tactics of coercion remain the same, but thankfully, so does the courage of the faithful.
So, the absolutely crucial point in this first section is the outcome. According to the text, the parallel doesn't just end with persecution, it ends with divine deliverance and victory. Just as God miraculously delivered the faithful from that Babylonian furnace, Revelation promises that God will ultimately vindicate his saints. The historical record is basically presented as an ironclad guarantee for the prophetic promise.
Moving right along to Section 2, crucial prophetic differences.
Because, as you know, history doesn't just copy and paste, it amplifies. We are pivoting now from similarities to escalations because the prophetic future raises the stakes exponentially. Let's examine the actual nature of the image itself. King Nebuchadnezzar's creation was a towering golden statue. Sure, it was impressive and definitely intimidating, but ultimately, just a silent piece of metal. But the image of the beast? The prophecy states it is actually given breath and can speak. It's a bizarre, downright terrifying escalation from an inanimate idol to something that actually mimics life. And consider the builder. The ancient statue was built by a human political king, Nebuchadnezzar. The future image is constructed by the false prophet, which adds this whole layer of deep, dark, spiritual deception to the political power. Now this is where the intensity really ramps up. Notice the massive difference in scope. Nebuchadnezzar's decree was limited to the Babylonian Empire. It was vast, sure, but it was regional. Revelation 13 expands this to every single tribe, people, language, and nation. It is a completely global event. There is no escaping it. And finally, look at the additional control. In Babylon, there was no real equivalent to what comes next. In Revelation, we see the introduction of the mark of the beast. This completely revolutionizes the threat because it directly links forced worship with the global economy. If you don't comply, you literally cannot buy or sell. It's total, inescapable control.
Which brings us to Section 3, the theological pattern.
Having seen the parallels in these massive escalations, let's zoom out for a second. and look at a clear roadmap of how these events unfold. There is a very specific six-step theological pattern that perfectly bridges historical Babylon with the future apocalypse. Step 1. Human rulers exalt themselves, basically trying to take the place of the divine. Step 2. An image is erected to visually and physically represent their absolute authority. Step 3. Worship of that image is strictly demanded of the entire populace. Step 4. The faithful believers, anchored in their convictions, refuse to comply. Step 5. Persecution inevitably follows that refusal. And finally, Step 6. God intervenes and vindicates his people. Whether it's happening in ancient times or in the prophetic future, the source argues that this cycle is an unchangeable law of spiritual history.
Let's jump into Section 4, the talking doll deception.
Now we arrive at what is probably the most jarring warning in the entire source document. Beware of this talking doll. It really draws our focus to the bizarre climax of this prophecy. It sounds almost absurd, right? Until you realize the terrifying implications of this deception disguised as power. First off, it talks. This isn't just an idol, it's an interface. It's a deception that mimics life and intellect to fool the masses. Second, it doesn't just sit there. It actively demands worship in direct opposition to God. Third, through the mark, it exerts ultimate control over the body, the mind, and the economy. And fourth, yielding to it doesn't just cost you your temporary freedom. The text warns it leads to eternal separation. This talking doll concept is basically the ultimate Trojan horse of human history.
So, what is the countermeasure to this incredible deception? The source points directly to Revelation 14:7. It says, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water." Amidst a global mandate to worship a synthetic, talking image that controls the entire economy, the biblical countercommand is to look past the deception and worship the original creator. It's a powerful call to shift our focus away from the fabricated, temporary power of the beast and back to the genuine, eternal power of the one who actually made heaven and earth.
And finally, Section 5, a call to faithfulness.
This brings us to our final takeaway. We've decoded the ancient blueprint, we've seen the terrifying escalations, and we understand the deceptive pattern at play. So now, let's look at a grounded, practical solution. The empowering summary message here is crystal clear. To avoid these profound spiritual traps, you have to do three things. First, stand firm. When the pressure to conform literally becomes a matter of life, death, and economic survival, you need an unshakable foundation. Second, remain faithful. Look at the historical track record of the faithful remnant in Babylon. They didn't bend and they weren't abandoned. And third, worship only the living God. Absolutely do not be seduced by the talking images and the coercive powers of any era.
This explainer leaves us with a really powerful final anchor from 1 Corinthians 15:58. Be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. Because when history repeats itself on a global scale, the requirement for the faithful remains exactly the same as it was on the plains of ancient Babylon. Be immovable. As we wrap up this analysis of the golden image and the image of the beast, I want to leave you with this thought to mull over. If the exact same spirit of forced worship and economic coercion were to rise tomorrow, what is anchoring you so deeply that you would remain completely immovable?